There's a certain kind of silence that lives in the home of an addict. The kind that hums beneath every door, heavy and unpredictable. The kind that teaches you to hold your breath without realizing you've stopped breathing at all. As a child, you learn to listen for footsteps, the sound of bottles, the shift in tone that means run or stay still or brace yourself for what comes next. You grow up early in a house like that, but the truth is, you never really grow up at all. Because while your body moves forward, there's a part of you that stays frozen in that kitchen, at that table, in that hallway, waiting for the storm to pass, waiting for safety that never quite arrives. This is about the child who learned to survive before they learned to live. The child who became strong because they had no other choice. The child the world calls resilient, but who knows the weight of that word in ways most people never will. This is about the psychology, the pain, and the paradox of being raised by someone who couldn't raise themselves. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. If you grew up in a home touched by addiction, if this story feels familiar, share your experience in the comments below. Not for me, for the person reading it who needs to know they're not alone, because silence kept you small once. Let's make sure it never does again. Now let's talk about what really happens to the child of an addict. People often look at the child of an addict and say they turned out strong. They call them responsible, mature, independent. They marvel at how well they function, how composed they seem, how much they've accomplished despite it all. But they never see the cost of that strength. Society loves a survival story. We romanticize resilience. We celebrate the people who made it out, as if trauma is just a test you pass, a chapter you close, a mountain you climb and leave behind. But here's what we don't talk about. Many adult children of addicts don't just survive, they perform survival. Every single day. They look functional. They are functional. But underneath that composure is a nervous system that never learned to rest. Underneath that smile is a child who learned early that emotions are dangerous, that needs are burdens, that love is something you earn by being small, quiet, and helpful. The world sees strength. They feel exhaustion. The world sees independence. They feel isolation. The world sees someone who has it together. They feel like they're one moment away from falling apart. Because here's the truth. Adaptation is not the same as healing. And just because you survived doesn't mean you were ever safe. The child of an addict learns to manage chaos, but they rarely learn to trust peace. They become experts at reading the room, anticipating danger, keeping everyone else comfortable. They grow up fast, but emotionally they remain unfinished. They become adults who are still trying to solve a problem that was never theirs to fix. So let's talk about what actually happens in the brain and the body of a child growing up in this kind of environment. Because this isn't just emotional. This is neurological. This is attachment. This is survival architecture being built in real time. Parentification. This is when a child becomes the caregiver, the emotional protector, the peacekeeper for the parent who should have been protecting them. They learn to manage chaos by sacrificing their own needs. They learn that their value is in their usefulness, that love is something you earn through service, through silence, through making yourself smaller so someone else can take up space. And here's the cruelest part. They grow up fast, but emotionally they remain frozen. Because you can't develop a healthy sense of self when you're too busy managing someone else's collapse. Parentification doesn't just steal childhood, it steals identity. Because the child never gets to ask, who am I when I'm not fixing, soothing, or surviving? Hypervigilance. The nervous system of a child in an unstable home is always on, always scanning, always waiting for the next shift. They listen for footsteps. They watch for tone changes. They can smell alcohol before it's even opened. They read a room the way most people read a book, and they do it without thinking because it's not a skill, it's survival. But here's what that does over time. It trains the brain to associate love with unpredictability. Safety becomes foreign. Calm feels dangerous. Peace feels like the moment before the storm. So even in adulthood, even in safe relationships, they struggle to relax, because their body remembers what their mind tries to forget, that the last time they felt safe, something terrible happened. Hypervigilance doesn't turn off just because the environment changes. The body keeps the score. Attachment distortion. When your first experience of love is unstable, it shapes how you understand connection for the rest of your life. The child of an addict learns that love is conditional, that it comes and goes, that it can be warm one moment and cruel the next. That the people who are supposed to protect you are also the ones who hurt you most. And so relationships become confusing. Intimacy feels threatening. Vulnerability feels like weakness. They crave closeness but fear dependence. They long to be seen but don't know how to let anyone in. As adults, They often attract partners they can save. They choose people who need fixing because that's the only kind of love that feels familiar. They confuse chaos with passion. They mistake intensity for intimacy. Because when your first love was unstable, you spend the rest of your life trying to earn the love you deserved all along.
The child of an addict learns to disappear, not physically, emotionally. They become the peacekeeper, the achiever, the ghost in the corner who never causes problems because problems mean danger, and danger means everything falls apart. They hide their emotions to prevent explosions. They suppress their needs to keep the peace. They learn that the safest way to exist is to not exist at all. And so their identity becomes built on not being a problem, on being easy, on being the one person in the house who doesn't make things worse. But here's what happens when a child learns to erase themselves. They carry that erasure into adulthood. They become adults who apologize for taking up space, who feel guilty for having needs, who struggle to ask for help because they learned early that asking means burdening, and burdening means being too much, and being too much means being abandoned. Emotional repression becomes perfectionism. Silence becomes people-pleasing. The inability to express anger becomes chronic anxiety, chronic fatigue, chronic illness. Because the body doesn't forget what the mind suppresses. They learn to smile with fear behind their teeth, to laugh quietly so no one thinks they're mocking, to tiptoe through their own childhood and then their own adulthood, afraid that one wrong step will shatter everything. They master the art of making others comfortable while ignoring their own discomfort. And they do it so well that no one, not even them, realizes how much pain they're in. Because the invisible child doesn't just hide from others, they hide from themselves. And the saddest part? They become so good at disappearing that even when someone tries to see them, they don't know how to be seen. Here's the paradox. The child of an addict grows up strong, but not safe. They develop extraordinary empathy. They become deeply responsible, fiercely independent. They learn to survive on their own because relying on anyone else was never an option. And society celebrates this, calls it resilience, calls it strength, calls it inspiring. But no one talks about the wound beneath the strength. Because yes, they're independent, but it's not freedom. It's hyper-independence. It's the inability to ask for help even when they're drowning. It's the belief that needing someone makes them weak, that leaning on anyone is dangerous, that safety is something you create alone or not at all. Yes, they're responsible, but it's not maturity. It's survival. It's the child who had to become the adult because there was no one else. It's the person who now struggles to rest, to play, to exist without a purpose because their worth was always tied to what they could do, never to who they were. Yes, they're empathetic, but it's not just kindness, it's hyper-awareness born from self-preservation. It's the ability to read people because reading people kept them safe. It's compassion built on the bones of their own unmet needs. They crave connection but fear dependence. They long to be seen but don't know how to be vulnerable. Their self-worth is built on usefulness, not existence. They became the adult in a house that needed a child. And even now, decades later, they still apologize for needing anything at all. They learned early that love could vanish, that it could turn cold, that it could walk out the door or check out while still sitting right there. So they never stopped earning it. They never stopped proving they were worth keeping, worth loving, worth staying for. And the cruelest irony? They give so much love because they're still trying to fill the hole left by the love they never received. They care so deeply because they know what it feels like to be forgotten. They try so hard because they remember what it was like when no one tried for them. This is the paradox. The gift and the wound, inseparable. The child of an addict grows up the most compassionate, most responsible, most resilient person you'll ever meet. And they're also the most exhausted, most guarded, most quietly heartbroken. Because strength that's forced isn't strength, it's survival. And survival isn't living. So what does healing look like for the child of an addict? It doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means remembering yourself before it did. It means recognizing that the child who had to grow up too fast deserves to finally rest. That the person who spent their life caring for everyone else deserves to be cared for. That the one who learned to survive alone deserves to learn that they don't have to anymore. Healing begins when they stop parenting everyone else and start parenting themselves. When they give themselves the compassion they gave to others, the patience they never received, the permission to need, to feel, to fall apart without fear of abandonment. Therapy isn't a luxury for the child of an addict. It's a necessity, because they need a space where they can finally stop performing, stop managing, stop holding it together. a space where they can be messy, angry, sad, scared, without worrying that their emotions will destroy everything. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. Because the child of an addict was taught that other people's needs always come first, that saying no makes you bad, that protecting yourself makes you cruel. But boundaries are how they reclaim the space that was stolen from them, how they learn that love doesn't require self-sacrifice, that relationships can be safe, reciprocal, and soft. Emotional validation is reparenting in real time. It's learning to say, what I feel is real, what I need is valid, what happened to me was not my fault. Because for so long, they minimized their own pain, told themselves it wasn't that bad, that others had it worse, that they should just be grateful they survived. But surviving isn't the goal. Living is. And living means learning that peace isn't danger, that rest isn't guilt, that joy isn't something you have to earn or brace yourself to lose. Forgiveness, if it comes, isn't about excusing the parent, it's about freeing the child still trapped inside. It's about letting go of the belief that if they had just been better, quieter, more helpful, more lovable, maybe things would have been different. It's about understanding that addiction is a disease, not a choice they made, and that the parent's inability to show up had nothing to do with the child's worth. Healing is reconnecting with joy, with play, with trust, with the parts of themselves they had to shut down to survive. It's learning that love without chaos is possible, that healthy relationships feel calm, not intense, that you can exist without fixing anyone. It's understanding that you don't have to keep earning love, that you don't have to keep proving you're worth staying for, because you were always worth it, even when no one showed you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. The real strength isn't holding it together. It's learning that you don't have to anymore. Maybe you were never broken, just burdened too early. Maybe you were never cold, just tired of reaching for warmth that never came. The child of an addict grows up carrying two lives, the one they lived and the one they lost, the childhood they had and the childhood they deserved. But healing begins when they finally put both down, when they stop trying to fix the past and start building a future where they're allowed to be soft, to be imperfect, to be human. Because you were never meant to be the adult at 6 years old. You were never meant to manage someone else's pain while swallowing your own. You were meant to be safe. You were meant to be held. You were meant to grow up slow, with room to make mistakes, to be messy, to be a child. And it's okay now, finally, to rest. It's okay to stop earning love and start receiving it. It's okay to let someone else hold you without waiting for them to let go. Because you survived. You made it through. You became strong in ways most people will never understand. But now you get to be soft. Now you get to heal. Now you get to be free.